Right now, CBI is asking for help finding this woman. Virgie Mason was last seen on Monday morning leaving a Super 8 motel in Durango. Virgie's 64 years old, stands 5'3", about 190 pounds, and was last seen wearing a dark shirt and jeans. If you see her, you're asked to call 911.
Today, a former Northern Colorado middle school teacher accused of sexually assaulting two students is expected to make his first appearance in court. Back in April, staff from Poudre School District reported accusations to police involving Evan King. The 50-year-old has worked as a teacher and assistant track coach at Lincoln Middle School in Fort Collins for nearly 9 years, but Poudre Schools tells us that the charges stem from reports of behavior during this past school year. A 4-month investigation found 2 girls who were victims and multiple students who were witnesses. King was arrested last Tuesday. That hearing starts at 8:30 this morning.
And an update out of Adams County this morning. A woman whose toddler died of fentanyl poisoning will spend 22 years in prison. Police officers responded to Nicole Casillas' home in Brighton in January 2022 after her 22-month-old daughter, Aviana Montoya, was found unresponsive and not breathing. An autopsy revealed she had 10 times the amount of fentanyl needed to kill an adult in her system. In April, the child's father, Alonzo Montoya, was convicted on 5 charges and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Casillas pled guilty to child abuse resulting in death and possession with intent to distribute fentanyl.
Right now, lawyers are negotiating a plea deal with military prosecutors for the U.S. soldier who crossed the border from South Korea into the communist North nearly a year ago. The 24-year-old Travis King was supposed to face a preliminary hearing in Texas on Tuesday. Instead, it was delayed. King is facing 8 charges, including desertion, possession of child pornography, and assault. Before crossing the DMZ into North Korea last year, he had been released from a South Korean detention center on assault charges. King was supposed to fly back to Texas, but crossed into North Korea instead. He was held for several weeks, then returned to U.S. custody last September.
A man is dead this morning after police shot and killed him near the site of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. This is new video right now of when investigators say a man armed with 2 knives was killed. They say he charged toward an unarmed man and ignored police commands to stop and drop the weapon, so officers shot him. This is the body camera video right here. The officers involved are from the police force in Columbus, Ohio, who were in Milwaukee providing additional security for the convention. Police say the shooting likely wasn't related to the convention itself.
Today at the RNC, former President Donald Trump's newly selected running mate is expected to accept the GOP vice presidential nomination and address the convention. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio appeared alongside the former president again last night. And this morning, we now know that Trump's wife, Melania, is expected to join him at the RNC tomorrow, along with his daughter, Ivanka Trump, and son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Tomorrow, Trump is expected to speak publicly for the first time since the attempt on his life and formally accept the GOP nomination for president.
Some big names that we heard from at the convention are Trump's former rivals. Speakers last night included his fiercest critic during the primaries, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both now pledging their support.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him.
Let's send Joe Biden back to his basement, and let's send Donald Trump back to the White House.
Many Republicans at the convention say the assassination attempt against former President Trump has unified them, which has been a major theme of this convention. Trump has even rewritten his speech for when he accepts his nomination tomorrow, focusing now on uniting the nation.
It is now 6:07, and this year we have seen a series of studies on ultra-processed foods come down and how bad they can be for you, and it's making some people second-guess what they're eating. 9 News reporter Anusha Roy joins us now. And Anusha, you talked with a clinical dietitian who's helping put this into perspective, so it's not all scary.
Yeah, because some of these studies were showing that eating higher levels of ultra-processed food might shorten your lifespan by more than 10%. Other studies showing it raises the risk of developing or dying from dozens of adverse health conditions. So when we're talking about processed foods, this is any food taken from its original form and then changed in some way, cooking, cutting, chopping, and then the preservatives and the artificial ingredients. Common ones: mac and cheese, canned fruit and vegetables, even protein powder. But clinical dietitian Violet Vernick said that instead of being scared, think about the balance. She said the challenge is that these foods are everywhere. A lot of times they are cheaper and more convenient. So the more ingredients you're recognizing, the better. She said it may not be 100% of the time, but that's okay. And cheaper whole food options are non-organic fruits and vegetables, and for the processed foods to really be looking at things like sodium, fats, and carbs.
can be so tricky, and as a mom, I'm sure you understand you're balancing time and kids being picky. And I think there's another great option I would actually like to add in the example of having your kids eat mac and cheese, maybe having that processed food and then adding in a whole food like broccoli and maybe some chicken for protein. That's a whole food. Kind of trying to, again, all about balance.
Other dietitians have said that if you can't avoid it altogether, aim for 85% of your diet to come from non-processed foods. And now researchers are really asking lawmakers to make it as easy as possible to identify ultra-processed foods and then make healthy foods more affordable. Vernick also said processed foods do serve a purpose, not just convenience. She works at a hospital where people are relying on feeding tubes to stay alive, and that is a very processed food. Coming up at 7 a.m. on KTVD, we're taking a look at the history of these kinds of foods and how we even got to this point. For 9 News, I'm Anusha Roy.
I mean, it's good that we're just talking about it. You know, now I look at the label, and if it's long, I'm like, there's too many things in it, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yes, and we've just heard so many studies about, you know, increased risks of cancer and Alzheimer's with these processed foods, so you got to find the balance.
Exactly. I mean, I did the same thing ever since I talked to this dietitian, like really paying attention to the labels and then figuring out what are your alternatives. I think a huge factor here, though, is going to be budget for people.
Absolutely.
Especially if these processed foods are cheaper, right? It puts people at a disadvantage, and trying to figure out how do you eat healthier within a budget.
That's the thing. More people probably would want to eat healthier.
Yeah.
It's just expensive to do so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right,
exactly.
Anusha, thank you very much. Let's get a check of your forecast now with Chris.
Yeah, for today, highs in the upper 80s for us here in Denver. We'll have some afternoon showers and storms around, especially early to mid this afternoon. So kind of similar to the last 2 days when we had those storms, mainly between about 1 and 4 p.m. Same idea for today, maybe even on the earlier side of that. So storms pop on up, as I mentioned, between about maybe 1 and 2 p.m. or so. And then we'll see those storms push their way east. As they move east, they'll probably intensify out over the eastern plains, especially Fort Morgan and Lyman and points east of there. We'll keep an eye on that risk for severe weather, and I'll have more details on a very cool weekend forecast coming up in just a couple minutes. Erica?
Chris, thank you. Right now it's 6:10 on your Wednesday morning. We're watching a pretty wild scene in Aurora. This is along Sable and 4th, not too far off of 6th Avenue, right out front of the Griffiths Fitzsimmons apartment complex here, where you can see this vehicle went off the road somehow. I've been watching this shot since Sky 9 got up over it about 10 minutes ago or so, and it's really unclear how this vehicle went from one of the roads, either 4th or Sable, and made it this far into the grassy area. There's a lot of damage to that vehicle. Again, it's right in a really like wooded area, wooded grassy area. We're not seeing any other vehicles. It doesn't look like any other vehicles are on the scene at this hour. Of course, there is this tow truck. I was watching the gentleman setting this up, grabbing a wire and getting ready, it looks like, to probably hook that vehicle and pull it out and then clear the scene. So we're really not seeing any major impacts go as far as your drive on Sable or 4th. But of course, a really wild thing we don't see too often. So again, we're still working to learn more details this morning, and we will bring you those as we learn them.
Sounds good, Erica. Thank you. Something we'll be seeing a lot of during the 2024 Olympics in Paris is the Olympic logo, but that doesn't mean we're seeing everything that the logo represents.
Right. Our Matt Renew will soon head to Paris to cover the Olympics. And Matt, Olympic organizers wanted a unique logo for the Summer Games in Paris. Well, they certainly found one.
They certainly did, Jordan and Corey. Good morning. And while it seems pretty clear what this logo is all about, kind of looks like an Olympic flame there, there's actually a lot more than meets the eye with this logo. And if you think you see a woman inside of it, you're right.
The paper bag with that.
Looking at all the 2024 Olympic merchandise out there, and you'll see the Paris Olympic logo, while not exactly seeing all of what that logo represents.
The logo was for us a very important thing.
Etienne Taubois with Paris 2024 says when it comes to the Olympic logo, there's more than meets the eye, with 3 symbols represented in one logo. First, it's the Olympic medal.
You get the medal on the background, which was excellent. You know, that's what we're striving for.
Then there's an Olympic flame.
You get that flame because that flame is a fantastic Olympic symbol, and it's passion.
And if you think that flame looks like a woman,
you know, we wanted those games to be human, and then it becomes a face.
You're right, because along with the medal and the flame, French designers drew in the outline of a very famous French woman.
And that face, it's a bit of the symbol of the Republic, the Marianne. And why not have a women's face? Because that says a lot.
And ATN says that makes 3 great ways to build one logo.
Those 3 symbols into one logo, we liked it very much.
Getting a lot out of that logo, and it's right now also a big seller in Paris at the Olympic stores that are starting to open around town. A lot of people pretty interested in getting that logo, and not only are there the 3 designs within that logo, but this is the first time in history that the same logo will be used for the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. Reporting from our Olympic set, I'm Matt Renew, 9 News.
I love the design, and I can see why it's already so popular. Matt, thank you. Paris Mayor Annie Hidalgo took a dip into the Seine River earlier this morning. She is trying to ease the concerns about the water quality. Since 2015, the government has spent more than $1.5 billion in making sure that the river is cleaned for swimmers. Just in case something changes, Paris Olympic organizers do have a backup swimming location. But as you can see, she went in, no problem.
That was her promise, and she did it.